Here, I would like to invite you to put your hands together, give you a biggest welcome today, and hopefully at the end you have a chance to say, something to him. Join me. Give him a big hand. Cary Nosler.
Well, Cary, you're starting a new adventure. And part of me is jealous. And part of me is sad because I've gotten used to seeing you. But I wish you the very best. And where you're going, I've had some interesting travels there, so you are gonna love it.
Well, Arlene, I've got an extra room.
Well, I was waiting for you to tell me.
Well, thank you. And Arlene, again, the inspiration that you've given me and you just the adroit way that you have of presenting information has always been something I've admired. I mean, you are a real pro, not only in the way you do what you do, but the information. So you've been a real inspiration, and I thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, that goes two ways, Cary. We each have our own little niche.
Absolutely.
And,
Yeah.
I
And it's been
appreciate
fun.
the kind words.
It's been fun kind of co-niching with you.
I was looking at my computer the other day, and we had some pictures taken together, if you remember.
I do.
So I was looking at that and I thought, oh my, I don't even know what date these were taken, but I'm hanging on to those. So,
Well, thank you.
all right, take care. I'll look forward to hearing from you when you're planted.
And again, I get your newsletter all the time, so I'm going to stay in contact with you as well. So thank you.
Well, I might tell you that I think I'm going to quit sending it out. I think I'm just going to post it on my website because it's gotten very expensive to send out, so that people can just go to my website to Brain Bulletins and look at all the past ones and the new ones and so on. So
okay, that makes sense. But as long as
if you learn any information you think I need to know, be sure to share it.
Okay, definitely.
All right, take care.
Thank you. And that's again is a part of my DNA and your DNA. It's a constant. I still love researching. I still love, learning. When you stop learning, Arlene, I think that's the end.
Well, let me tell you, age-proofing your brain is continually doing what you're doing, but you are, I hope, reading out loud 10 minutes a day, because that
Arlene,
is now totally.
Ever since you said that, Arlene, I have done that every day.
And look at you. You look fabulous.
No, it's part of my radio thing anyway, but I love reading out loud because, again, there's challenges as you're reading. You come up with words maybe you haven't said before and you have to compose, and especially now with the whole Ukrainian thing, and you've got names that you've never ever pronounced in your life.
I know.
But it's a nice, brain
exercise.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you. Again, I'm glad you mentioned that because I have every day, Arlene, I do that.
Well, if everybody that I had recommended that to had done it, the world would have changed. But you're one of the few, I think, that put it into practice.
Well, if it makes sense, I'll do it. And that made sense.
All right, take care.
Thank you. There is a lot of mixed emotions on my part as well. I mean, I am going to Thailand, but with the advent of all the electronic stuff that's available, obviously I'm still going to be around, as it were, but I started thinking about things. And Greg mentioned 1994, first time we get together. Well, let me tell you the truth. Greg was not impressed at all. Later told somebody, well, I don't know, why are we talking to this guy? And I don't know, I just talked. I didn't know what I should do. I wasn't performing, for goodness sakes. But when we had that first meeting, and Arlene, we were there at that first meeting, and then it kind of, I guess, showed Greg that I had some ability to communicate with people. But there was actually something that happened in that first meeting that stayed with me and formed the basis of information I have today that validates just the importance of Enterprime, for example. I remember getting up there when I was going to talk, and I made reference. I don't know if you remember, they used to have these little, kind of like a hand puzzle type thing. It would have holes, and you had these little BBs, and you had to maneuver them around so that they would get into the various holes. And I was thinking at the time, well, that's Enterprime. You know, we were talking about phytochemicals and how all the different adventures that were now being opened up in terms of nutrition by looking at these substances that were previously unknown. You know, well, we talked about vitamins and minerals, but no one was talking about the phytochemicals. And here's Enterprime loaded with it. And I remember thinking to myself, you know, what Enterprime is doing, it's like that little game, it's filling in the holes. And that's vitally important, folks. As it turns out, if you don't fill in those holes, what you do, you're subjecting yourself to things down the line that didn't have to happen, but because you weren't paying attention to the various nutrients that we have to have, you were running into trouble. I want to reference a fellow named Dr. Bruce Ames. He's been one of the real heroes in the whole field of molecular biology and chemistry and mitochondria, mitochondria function. Mitochondria are the little engines in your cell that produce energy. Without them, you don't have any energy. You don't have the desire to get up and move or recover from exercise, for example. So mitochondria are very important. Dr. Ames is a professor emeritus from UC Berkeley, one of the most prominent molecular biologists, nutritional biologists in the whole world. He was also at the Children's Hospital Oakland Research Institute, and then he was also the head of their molecular biology study group. What he talked about is something called the triage theory. And that's what I want to talk about, the triage theory. Triage is actually a medical term. Let's say unfortunately, you're in war, right? You're a doctor. They're bringing in patients to see you. Well, the first thing you do is to discover what is the one thing you can do that will have the most immediate effect on saving your life. Now, maybe you've got several different problems that need to be dealt with, but if you don't take the first one to prolong life, the others are redundant in a sense because you're not going to make it. Well, Dr. Ames proposed something called the triage theory. And in it, he said, okay, look, he said, from time immemorial, we have had food insecurity. It's only been a relative within the whole sphere of human evolution, the ability to go to the store like we do now, you know, take this, take that, whatever we want. So tiny a part of our total experience on this earth. For the most part, we never knew when we were going to eat. We never knew when we were going to have to conserve food. So the body in its wisdom evolved a whole plan here that said, okay, look, since we don't have enough of this particular nutrient to last us forever, what we're going to do, we're going to prioritize whatever it takes for you to survive today, just today, for example. And hopefully from that, if you don't survive, you can't reproduce. So that was the whole purpose in terms of our evolution. Live that day, hopefully reproduce so that the species can continue. That was part of his triage theory. Well, he said what's important here is that there are 33 essential vitamins and minerals that you have to have in order to live and to thrive. The two that he looked at in terms of developing his theory was vitamin K and selenium, because both of those, vitamin K is the coagulation vitamin. In fact, that's why it's called K, because it was developed by a German, and coagulation in Germany starts with a K. You know, so what we found though is that vitamin K has multiple roles, not just in blood coagulation, but it also directs calcium away from from the arteries to your bone. It has to do with immune function, as does selenium. Selenium is a very important antioxidant. And you know, the first things it does are what keeps you going. But then after that, if you want more cancer protection, for example, you have to have more of it. So if the body can only use a certain amount at the time and it doesn't have anything left over, Dr. Ames said, you know what's happening? You're setting yourself up for some kind of a health crisis in the future, because you're not planning for the future. You're not getting ready for what might happen to you. Every time I hear people say, well, so-and-so went in and the doctor says you had this, just happened overnight. Nonsense. Nothing happens overnight unless you're in an accident, a physical altercation of some kind, and that's happening, like say an auto accident or you trip and fall, fine. But as far as developing a chronic disease, you've been developing it for a long time. And if you've had a shortage of any of those essential, 33 essential vitamins and minerals, which according to the surveys, we're all deficient in. We're deficient in magnesium, we're deficient in vitamin D, we're deficient in selenium, we're deficient in omega fats, the EPA, DHA. Well, the body does what it can at the time so you can get along another day. But when there's something developing down the line, you're going to feel the brunt of that particular problem. That's what I saw with Enterprise. That was back to the original thing, filling in the holes, filling in those nutritional gaps that unfortunately, the way we live today, we don't plan for those kinds of things because the food we eat is deficient in certain nutrients, or we're eating certain things that make it harder for the body to work so that we can use what we should have. So Enterprise has been a real boon in that regard. And we've had so many stories over the years of people who just took a little bit and all of a sudden had such dramatic things happen in their life. Why? Because they were filling in the holes. That's what you've got to do. And let me just do a little aside here. I want you to fill in the holes, but I don't want you to keep doing the kinds of things that provide food that doesn't have the things we need in the first place. If you want to get the double benefit, have a really good diet and take Enterprime. Now you're cooking. Now you're on all the cylinders, because not only are you not incurring those kinds of losses that you shouldn't have to deal with, but you're adding insurance to the body so that when times of stress or any kind of situation where the body now has to amp up its intake of certain things, you're all ready to go. Like with COVID, for example, you know, the people that got affected the most from COVID were those that had so-called comorbidities. You had heart disease, you had diabetes, you were overweight, you weren't exercising, you weren't doing the things that you were supposed to do, and you had left your immune system vulnerable to this virus. So lots of people got it, obviously, but the people who got it the worst and unfortunately passed away were people who unfortunately make up a big part of everything that we are today. About a third, in 22 cities in the United States, a third of the population now is obese. We're looking at diabetes, rampant diabetes, having all kinds of problems, either pre-diabetic or full-on diabetic, having a non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. The liver is under siege because of diet and lack of exercise. So that's where most people are. So what do you expect when you get some kind of a violent immune challenge like we had with COVID? So you're getting your shots. If you decide to do that, fine. I'm not going to tell you one way or another, but for goodness sakes, keep your immune system as strong and primed, like with Enterprime, as you can. That's going to be the real key. And I just have to encourage you to do that. And at the same time, my other area of concern, not concern, but also just research, because I've been involved in exercise all my life. And thank goodness I was exposed to strength training at a very young time in my life. And have, for the most part, have stayed with it during various times when you do more or less or whatever. But I also always understood that. And now today, folks, we're living longer than ever, right? the life expectancy, except for now, for the last few years because of COVID, for the first time in history, the US life expectancy went down. Okay, but we're going to recover. We'll start coming back up and around the world. You're seeing that as well. But let me just do an aside before we get off into the exercise thing. Here's something to think about. And we've talked about living, having a long life. Well, there's two ways to look at that, folks. One is your life expectancy. The other is the healthy life expectancy. And the two are not in sync. What you're finding today is that there can be several years difference between your healthy life expectancy and regular life expectancy. Even in Japan, Okinawa, again, the longest lived people as a large percentage of the population. You have more isolated groups, but in terms of the largeness of the population, they're still the longest lived, but their healthy life expectancy is not the same as their life expectancy. In some cases, almost 1/5 of your life can be spent with the ravages of chronic disease and illness. 1/5, think about that. That means that toward the latter part of your life, it's no fun. It's no fun. You're having to have assistance, just in some cases, getting up out of a chair. And when things come along like a COVID, man, you're just sitting there, waiting to get attacked, so to speak. So in terms of that, we want to concentrate on healthy life expectancy, and not just life expectancy. And one of the ways to do that, because again, people are living longer, we're living longer, we need to keep our bodies prepared to function at a level that makes life comfortable. There's a situation, I've been following this for years, because you see it as it develops. It's called sarcopenia. Sarcopenia is the loss, age-related loss of muscle mass, muscle function. In other words, as the muscle leaves your body because you're not doing anything to keep it there, that's really the most intense aspect of aging. That is what aging is, the loss of muscle mass. And as you, from 30 on, if you don't do something to stop it, every decade you lose a certain amount of muscle. It's what Greg and I have talked about. I have called it the I used to's. Remember, I used to be able to do this. I used to be able to get up and walk here and do this. I used to be able to pick up a gallon jug of milk with one hand, or juice, or whatever it happens to be. And now you can't do it. You have to have assistance. Used to be able to take lids off of containers. Now, my goodness, I struggle with all that stuff. Well, that's an aspect of muscle displacement. When you lose the muscle, you lose the ability to burn calories at rest. When you lose the muscle, it can be displaced by fat. So even if you weigh the same now as you did, say, 20 years ago, the percentage of muscle to fat can be extremely difficult or different. And sarcopenia, again, is now getting so much attention because as we live longer, we've got to take care of our aging population. Japan will be one of the first countries. They have the oldest population of any country on earth. And they've got a big problem dealing with frailty. And that's what we want to avoid. How do you deal with that? Well, exercise. But folks, please listen to me. Please listen to me. It's not just exercise. It's strength training. And no, I'm not talking about you being a female Arnold Schwarzenegger, for goodness sakes. I got to tell you this. I used to get so ticked off. I've been weightlifting most of my life. And when I would tell someone, you've got to lift weights, they say, oh, I don't want to get too big. Well, excuse me, it ain't going to happen. Believe me, it takes a lot more than lifting up a little 10-pound weight for you suddenly to bloom into some kind of a muscle monster. And what we're talking about is what your body has been challenged to do to survive over eons. When you do something that puts the muscle under stress, it responds by increasing the size of the muscle fibers. So instead of losing that muscle, you're keeping it, and in some cases, adding to it. And the more muscle you have on your body as you age, the more successful will be your aging perspective. You don't have to, again, get out there and just do something that makes your eyeballs bulge out of your head or whatever it happens to be. But you've got to do something that puts the muscle under more stress than you normally do. And there's lots of places today, folks, senior centers or whatever, that have strength training as part of their regimes. And if you decide to join a gym, by all accounts, go up and talk to the people that run the gym and see if they're qualified to take care of older people who are just starting to do a strength training program, for example. But it is so important. I really got to stress that to you because it's been on my heart when I see just how people are having a hard time, just some cases standing and just maintaining your balance. And as Arlene has talked about Alzheimer's over the years, listen, you want to keep that mind good, you do everything that she says, but you also have to exercise, and strength training is a critical component of that whole thing. You want to avoid sarcopenia. Here's a little tip here, folks. We've heard stories about protein, you know, how important protein is. It's from the Greek. Protein means of first importance. But we went through a phase where they said, oh, well, it's not so important how much you get. You only need a certain small amount, and we're all getting too much protein. Well, listen, the research is pretty clear on that. No, most of us are not getting enough protein as we age. Several reasons. One, if you live alone, you don't feel like cooking, you don't feel like eating, you might not have the money to have some of the more protein intense items, you might not have the digestion that's able to handle that. So you don't feel good when you're doing that, but you need that protein because it is involved in something called MPS, muscle protein synthesis. You have two factors: muscle protein synthesis, muscle protein breakdown. The body goes through those cycles all the time. You want to stay in muscle protein synthesis a lot longer than you want in muscle protein breakdown, because in muscle protein breakdown, the body looks to replenish its protein supplies. And if it doesn't have it in the bloodstream via the foods that you eat or supplements you take, guess where they go? Guess where they go? It goes to your own muscle. It breaks down your own muscle, and that's how you lose that muscle over time. So as you age, unfortunately, taking the same amount of protein at an older age as you had, say, when you were 20, won't give you the same results because it's called anabolic resistance. As you get older, for some reason, the same amount of protein, you don't get the signal back to the body to make protein, the muscle protein synthesis. It just doesn't work. So the recommendation, believe it or not, is to actually eat more protein as you age. So find out which forms that you can take that are the most compatible with your body, that you can handle well, but do not neglect your protein, along with your Enterprime and all the other goodies. And when I exercise, as we're talking about IMPaX products, when I have to exercise, I also include, before every exercise session and right after it, a little bit of the Delta E. The studies are so conclusive that caffeine, not large amounts, but caffeine per se is a really important stimulus for training, for exercise, for endurance. It's a critical part. And with Delta E, it's configured in such an ingenious way with all the different nutrients that surround it, so that you get the benefit of caffeine without the negative effects of just shoving a whole bunch of caffeine into your system. So it's a great product. And I've noticed that in some cases I guess because I do lots of things and I'm so consistent with my exercise that I don't really have a feeling, for what is doing what. But I did notice that when I stopped using the Delta E for a while, my focus was different. It helped me to focus on what I was doing. It helped me to focus on the task at hand. And that's what we found with a lot of folks and kids, as I understand too, helping your mind to focus on what's happening at that particular time. Other thing I want to talk about, the IMPaX 100. this is a genius product. And Greg and I were both really fortunate to have met Dr. Dallas Cleopatra. He was one of the real gems in my life in terms of just his outlook, his research ability, his very, very smart man who actually his PhD was in kind of like nutritional ethnic biochemistry, where he really looked at all the different things around the world that added up to the kinds of positive nutritional experiences that people were undergoing. So he had a very, very keen understanding of a bigger picture than just, what most PhDs in nutrition might have at that particular time. And he was the real genius in the guiding the light behind the development of IMPaX 100 with the wild bitter melon and a certain genotype, a certain species, not just bitter melon, but a certain special one that's grown in India, and also the rock lotus, an herb that grows in China, and apparently it's also an ornamental. Lots of gardens have rock lotus in the garden, but the experiences of people in this one county in China, Bama County, I believe it was, and then the scientist, the Chinese doctor who really started researching this, and the way that they extracted the properties that were the most important for the rock lotus. And what you had is, with the real epidemic we have today of diabetes and diabetic-like conditions, these were two substances that had a very definite effect in improving how effective insulin is in our body without making the body produce more insulin, because that's what happens actually when you have insulin resistance. You keep forcing the body to produce more insulin because you're bringing in all the carbohydrates and the fructose. And so after a while, the body literally loses the effectiveness of the insulin, but it keeps producing more. Well, with the bitter melon and the rock lotus, it makes your insulin more effective. So you're storing, you're able to store the fat and burn it better, and the other types of substances, the other lipids, and so you're more successful at maintaining the proper blood sugar level, which is critical. Most what they call prandial, which is right after a meal, and then during the whole day. So you don't have these surges or these swings up and down, because the insulin is more effective at maintaining its function in your body, which is so important. It's called a mimetic, where it actually, and it's not insulin, it doesn't make the body produce any insulin, but the other factors that deal with your liver, for example, it's very liver protective, which are critical, both of those elements. Very, very important for regeneration of that particular organ in the body. It maintains the proper level of activity to give you the energy you need without the swings. So those are critical elements. And the more you read about just what they do, the more I see the genius that Dallas had in understanding just how to put this together. And I had a laugh. Glycostat is the name of the proprietary process for using the bitter melon in the body. And Angie called me up. She had got a call from someone, and because it was called glycostat, and this person had a problem with statin drugs, he was concerned that glycostat might be a problem. And I explained, no, it's not a statin. It has nothing to do with statins. It's just part of the proprietary name called glycostat. So anyway, and this is something, again, because any carbohydrate meal in general, you should have some IMPaX 100, at least a half an hour if you can before the meal. That's a critical thing. A couple other tips with the meal: cinnamon, very effective for blood sugar control, and also a little bit of vinegar. Vinegar also slows down the absorption of the carbohydrates in the body. The IMPaX 100, some little bit of cinnamon, and Ceylon cinnamon is the best, and a little bit of vinegar, like on your salad at night or something like that. Boy, that's the real key to the whole thing. But you want to do that, folks. You want to keep that muscle on your body. You want to avoid sarcopenia. You want to make sure that you have an abundance of the necessary vitamins and minerals so that the body can not only take care of its immediate day-to-day needs, but plan for future activities so that you're not left nutritionally vulnerable to things that might get in and attack your immune system. That's the critical area, because again, you don't just get a disease overnight. Unfortunately, you've had to work for it. And today we're working too hard for disease. So let's work for health. And that's where Enterprime and IMPaX and Delta E and all the other family products come into effect with IMPaX. And I just got to say too, Greg was talking about our friendship. Well, I'll tell you what, Greg M is an inspiration to me and should be for all of you. We've had some very candid talks about his upbringing. Listen, we have the thing, you know, so-called Horatio Alger stories where people come up from very difficult times and are a success. That's Greg M. He's come from a background that most of us would have wilted under. He didn't wilt, he flourished. And so he's the man at the helm and has made sure that IMPaX has stayed strong and steady so that we all get the benefit from what he has done and the products that they develop. So again, a real vote of thanks for Greg in that regard.
Enterprime will soon be changing soy lectin to sunflower lectin. Why is this a benefit?
Well, the sunflower lecithin, again, it's when you process lecithin, there are certain things that maybe come along with it that maybe you don't need. The lecithin from soy is okay, but sunflower is a cleaner product, number one. And it's used in the body quite well. I would always prefer sunflower lecithin if I had a choice between the two. And let me tell you too, the choline that you get with the lecithin, Arlene will tell you, is vital for the brain. And choline deficiency is also another thing that unfortunately we're having to deal with. So adding the lecithin to begin with, and then the sunflower lecithin, which is a much better alternative, and it also just helps keep Enterprime so it flows properly, you know. So that's a critical thing as well.
I do have one, Cary, and this is Anita. I have been doing the resistance training and the strength training, and I'm kind of just upping it a bit. And I was just wondering, is it the amount of time, say 20 minutes a day, 10, or is it the amount of days that matters? You want to spread it out more?
Well, again, you certainly want to have at least 3 days a week that you're doing it. But truthfully, the most important thing is in terms of what benefit you're getting. There's no thing, just because you exercise for an hour doesn't mean you're getting better results than you did in a half hour. You know, this is a whole big area. Part of what I've not only researched, but I do in my own life that I've learned. Anita, the equation is TUT, T-U-T, time under tension. The more tension you can initiate while you're doing the exercise, the more benefit you get, and really the less reps you have to do, because it takes time. You've got four parts to a strength training move. You've got the concentric, which is so-called positive. Let's say you've got a dumbbell and you're lifting it up, you're doing a curl. As you lift the dumbbell up, that's the positive, the concentric. When you lower the weight, that's the eccentric, or the so-called negative. That can be 60% of the benefit, and most people waste that. They don't even consider the movement down or the stretching so that you get the muscle out to the stretched position. That's critical, Anita. If you want to get the most benefit, you come up, say 4 counts, you come down 8 counts. And then there's 2 other parts to it. Once you come up to the top, again, with tension, you're holding that tension, keeping the tension as you lower the weight. And when you get to the stretched position, you hold that for 2 to 4, 5 seconds, and then start up again. So it's a 4-phase for that particular rep. And when you do that, again, now you're going to get the most benefit from what you're doing. And Anita, concentrate on the largest muscle. Don't just do a little thing for the bicep or do, you know, quick little thing for your shoulders. The legs, the butt, the hips, the back muscles, chest, those are the major areas. Those are the areas where you have the biggest concentration of muscle, and that's where you need to make sure that you put your attention, because when you lose the leg muscles, for example, you can't stand as easily, you can't get up, you can't move as easily. And the back muscles, everything that you do is involved with the back. There's a saying in bodybuilding that, yeah, the chest looks good, but the back is the true means to determine how effective you are with your training, because the back is really so critical to everything that you do. But Anita, at least 3 days a week, and again, put more thought into each rep. And then, you know, how many reps you do, it's a matter of time. If you're doing them slow and it takes you 2-3 minutes to do a set, well, that's better than if you did it fast for 3 minutes. You know, you got the same amount of time involved. And here's one other thing too, Anita, and this again, it gets more involved. But you mentally, you've got to be in your body. You've got to feel what you're doing so that you can have a balanced body. And this is what happens. We all have our biases. Some people, you're going to be stronger with your right hand than your left hand. And if you look at people, you can see differences. You can see maybe your shoulders a little bit different here than this side, or the development in your back, maybe parts of the back muscle, the latissimus or the rhomboids or infraspinatus, whatever it happens to be, they're different. And unfortunately, when you do exercises fast and you're not concentrating on your form and what you're doing, you're actually exasperating those body indifferences, or I'm not saying imbalances, because again, your body goes back to its old cycle of what you're doing. So you have to do it slow. You have to concentrate on the body part that you're using. You may not know it, but I'm really, really into this kind of stuff. And sometimes I'm just going to do a whole session on that and just go over all the deals of muscle protein synthesis, muscle protein breakdown, balanced body, speed, the four-fold points of a rep, and especially the negativity. Anita, there was one study I just saw recently. All they did were the negative. They didn't even work on the positive. When they would do the slow, they'd bring it up fast, just do that. They got more results than when they did the positive part of the movement. So it's the negatives, that part of the body, that's the really critical part you work on. Make sure you concentrate on that.
Okay, thank you. And we have a question back here. Yes.
So is he familiar with some natural remedy for a meniscus tear before you have to end up having surgery? And the last one is, what about, like, I'm almost 80, and so I got this thick abdomen here, Buddha belly. And so I'm thinking the rest of me is sort of in proportion, but then I got this thickness here. So what's happening there?
Nita, could you go? I didn't hear all of that.
Meniscus tear.
got a
Anything that works?
Meniscus tear.
The knee.
In the knee, meniscus tear in the knee.
Right.
Trying to avoid surgery. Any suggestions?
Yeah.
Well, I've got a funny feeling on this one. The meniscus, again, you can go to a good therapist. You can develop the quadriceps, the big part of the muscle, the front part there, to provide more support for the meniscus even after it's short. You can't heal a meniscus. There's no blood flow to cartilage, but you can heal the muscle. You can strengthen the muscles around it. And you also want to take things that are anti-inflammatory, which is why Interprime would be very, very beneficial. But having exercised all my life and in many cases done crazy stuff, I mean, it's too bad that you have to come to a problem in your life and look back and say, why did I ever do that? I mean, doing half squats with 600 pounds, you know, whatever, what the poor body's going through. So I trashed my knees. The best thing I ever did in my life was get knee replacement. I'm telling you, I am so much more functionally able at this particular point. I waited. I did all kinds of stuff. I've got to tell you, sometimes it was successful. Sometimes it wasn't. But finally, when I got to the point where I realized, look, I'm just going through the motions here and I'm not having a lot of fun. So I prayed, oh boy, did I pray to find just the right doctor. And thank God I did find a guy that was the first doctor in the state to use computerized surgery, where they do a pre-programming and they have it all out on the program and they follow the guidelines. And oh, it was so successful. So yes, strengthen your quads, take anti-inflammatories if you need to, but if it gets to the point, don't just have it in your mind that you can't do a surgery. You can, but you've got to be active enough so that when you get done with the surgery, you can recover faster. The more active you are, the more physically fit you are before the surgery will determine how well you not only go through the surgery, but how quickly you recover from the whole thing. I've
Okay,
had
Cary,
Is the doctor that you found, is he still around? Is he
Oh
still
yeah, but
practicing?
he's in Southern California.
That's fine.
she wants to know the name.
His-
She'll go
his
down
name.
there.
Dr. William Long, Long. He's at Hollywood Presbyterian.
Say the name again, Wong,
Long.
first name?
Long, Long,
L-O-N-G, Long.
at Hollywood Presbyterian. Just a wonderful man as well. Just so impressed.
She also would like a solution for the spare tire around the middle.
Well, he doesn't do that.
IMPaX?
Doesn't do that one. But I'll tell you another thing here. Here's a little tip as well. If you do have some abdominal
Excess.
or you've noticed that your lower part of your stomach kind of sometimes just goes out a little, watch your posture. Just make sure you're standing up straight and watch out what they call pelvic tilt, where your pelvis actually kind of tips forward. And when that happens, well, of course, you're going to have a little bulge in the lower part of the stomach. So stand up. And remember, the doctor showing me, just stand up, put your hands on your hips, turn them until you find your abdominal area getting a little flatter. So a little tip for pelvic tilt.
We just want to thank Cary for so much health contribution, both to IMPaX and the world in general. He's an encyclopedia and can answer any question, as you can tell. And he's wanted to give that to us and our customers. And it's just been such a blessing. So thank you so much, Cary. We so appreciate you.
Oh, thank you, Kim. And I appreciate I've had the opportunity. You've given me a forum here at IMPaX, to let all this come out. So I appreciate that. And again, one of the important thing is too, in my own life, folks, I know it's important to not only give information, but to make it entertaining. And I know that there's lots of folks who are very entertaining when it comes to telling you things, but I've gotten to the point where entertaining is secondary to getting the information and inspiring you to do something. Just because something was, oh boy, that was really interesting. That's not the key. The key is, are you motivated to change something? Are you motivated to try a new approach? That's the whole key. Because if you keep doing the same old thing, you get the same results. So try something different and do it in an incremental way. I remember when I first started doing a lot of my talks, I'd go in person and people would get enthused about it. It was a very interesting time in our history where a lot of new things were coming out and people would get really excited, especially about nutrition. And I remember someone came up and said, that's it. I'm throwing away everything in my kitchen that's not good. Well, then they'd come back about a couple of weeks later and they'd realize they didn't know what to do. They threw away all their food. They threw away everything they were doing. So you can't just all of a sudden think you can just change the whole paradigm. You got to start off with incremental changes. Look at how you do things. You might want to also check, I've been very, very diligent about what's called time-restricted feeding. And most of the research, and again, and part of the reason when we looked at IMPaX, some of the things that they do are things that are similar to what happens when you do a modified fasting program, which is what time-restricted feeding is. So I try to eat during an 8-hour window And I try to have a 16-hour window where I'm not eating plus sleep. So it makes it a lot easier. You need at least 10 to 12 hours of not eating for the body to go through what's called autophagy. And this is where you do self-cleaning so that the cells now are cleaned out. They can breathe, they can function better. And most of the research is so impressive on the benefits of either time-restricted eating or maybe once a fasting every other day or something like that. That's a real key element in terms of maintaining the youthful aspect of your system, of the immune system. But so I would really advise you to look into time restricted. And if you do that, here's another thing in terms of how you go about doing it. So yeah, 8-hour eating cycle, 12-hour rest, that's the best. But if you've had any blood sugar issues, for example, and you try going a long time without eating, you could be in trouble. So let's say that you eat from, get up in the morning, 9 o'clock, and you eat again at 6 or 7 at night. Just try maybe a half-hour increment, adding a little, maybe waiting a half hour more in the morning, and then maybe a half hour less at night, or something like that, where you slowly start to extend the period in which you don't eat. And what you found is that you'll have just as much energy. In fact, you may have more energy. And I know I experimented here. When you work out, there's all kinds of companies that want to sell you stuff to take before your workout, pre-workout stuff, blah, 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 blah. Only pre-workout I do is a little bit of essential amino acids and the delta E. That's the important thing, and some baking soda, believe it or not, which is really critical. Part of why your hydrogen water and your alkaline water are so important. So I thought, well, I had to have something before I exercise since I'm doing time-restricted feeding. But that was nonsense. I could exercise when I exercise. I kind of wait. I said, okay, well, let's see what happens. Am I going to faint? Am I going to pass out? What's going to happen? Nothing. Had a great workout. My strength was fine. So not eating is not a detriment to exercise. In fact, if you look at historically, our ancestors got up. They didn't go to the Stone Age refrigerator. You didn't open it up and find a mastodon bone that you could nibble on. They wanted to eat. They had to go out and get their food. And they had to be active. They had to be vital. They had maybe have to run. You may have to go a long way away. Might have to carry something back. Well, you could do that even if you weren't eating, because the body has resources now that it can go to make sure that it has the strength and the energy to do what you need to do. And guess what? People who do time-restricted feeding and exercise also notice some very important weight loss benefits. At the same time, and that weight loss, folks, you don't want to lose weight, you want to lose fat. Keep your muscle up and lose the fat. That's the key. Keep your muscle on your body. That's the youthful part of your existence. That's the functional part of your existence. We got enough fat to last us a long time, but you want to have as much muscle as you can, logically, within reason, on your body. And you're going to see, as time goes by, you're going to see a lot more interventions and things that are being developed by scientists to make sure that we don't lose our muscle, or if we do, we can replace it so that we can function at a higher level. Otherwise, the whole healthcare system, as we age, folks, we're going broke as it is in terms of healthcare. But you just wait and see what happens when you get maybe double the number of people who are living past, let's say, 80 or 90, and needing care if they're not keeping themselves functionally healthy. So it's going to be a very, very important thing to stay as healthy as you can individually and as society.